The Broad Street Review podcast is an extension of Broad Street Review, Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation, an online arts and culture journal covering the greater Philadelphia area. I'm your host, Darnell Radford.
Today on the podcast, guest artist Jeffrey L. Page continues artistic relationships with Philadelphia Theater Company's production of Cost of Living by Martina Majok. Here is my interview with Jeffrey L. Page for PTC's Cost of Living. And welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Darnell Radford, and today I am in the virtual studio again with director and guest artist. Is that the right title for PTC?
I forgot what the title is. Resident, I think it's resident artist.
Yes, resident artist, Jeffrey L. Page. Jeffrey, welcome back. It's great to have you in the Emory studio.
And the crowd goes wild.
Then they let the dogs out for some reason. Where are the dogs at? We're gonna have fun. So I was so fortunate. It was such a great pleasure to be able to speak with you about PTC's production of Choir Boy. I love it. I'm still thinking about it. There were moments I wish I could have captured, like the music and that choreography was just beautiful. There were so many moments where I was like, I can't bottle this, which is also the beauty of live theater. This was a moment that will not happen in this way ever again. And I'm so fortunate enough to be in the space to experience that. So thank you for ushering that into our worlds. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Choir Boy. It feels so long ago.
I know,
Oh my God.
yes.
It feels so long ago, but I appreciate that. I wish that was like inside of COVID and whatnot, like almost at the tail end of it. I wish that more people could have seen it. I was very pleased with that production, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot, and so much has happened after Choir Boy, but
Yeah.
Choir Boy certainly meant a lot. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And at the time you were also working on 1776, the musical, which was on touring at the time, right?
No, not
No,
during
not yet.
Choir Boy. It
Yeah.
wasn't. I think during Choir Boy, I was still inside of deep strategic meetings for 1776. 1776 didn't hit until probably around Lady Day, when I did Lady Day last year at PTC, is when it hit. And that's when it was like on Broadway and touring and the whole nine.
Yeah. I was excited to see it at the Forest when it came to Philadelphia. We had two friends in the show, Lulu Picard and Sav Souza.
Yes. Oh my God.
Very excited to see them in the production in their various characters, and we met them at the stage door. We were fanning all over them. It was wonderful.
Oh, amazing. That makes me so happy that you were able to see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really enjoy it. There were so many elements about that. I know that's not the podcast we're talking about, but there were so many elements of that from the very beginning. Looking at all the shoes they're about to step into, I was like, what a beautiful visual right there. That's great.
And some people understood it, and some people, it just went right on over some people's heads in terms of like these shoes that we step into, like this adage of like the shoes that we step into.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what does it mean to actually step into those shoes? We take on a big monumentous task of stepping into certain shoes. Certain shoes must be stepped into just to complete the legacy and the story. And certain shoes require more of our personal selves than others. Like for instance, the character of Rutledge was most definitely pro slavery,
Hmm.
and the actor who played Rutledge, obviously
Yeah.
was not a fan of those things. So I think it's a bigger metaphor for how we as artists create and the kinds of stories we tell and the responsibility that we have to that art. So thank you for going and checking it out and supporting the work. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of an inside connection to 1776. So here in Philadelphia is an organization called Historic Philadelphia Incorporated. They produced the Once Upon a Nation project. They managed the Betsy Ross House in Franklin Square,
Mhm.
among other things. And when I worked for them, we produced a movie, a sing along version of 1776 every Friday night. And I was the production manager of that show, and I had a team who would give out like a handful of goodies that they could interact with the show. And so I had seen it so many times that I got to the point where I walked out after the Lees of Old Virginia, because it's like a dynamic song. It was just a good moment to walk out. So, but I enjoyed it so much, and the night that I went there, I didn't realize one of my coworkers from Historic Philadelphia was sitting a couple of rows ahead of me. I was like, "Hey, good to see you." I didn't know who would be here, but it was,
Oh,
of course, we would be there. Of
wow.
course, this was a big part of our lives. My life for 4 years of working with that production. It was such a great experience.
Wow, that's really exciting to hear. Are you from Philly?
So I'm from South Jersey. Like I grew up in Cumberland in Atlantic County in New
Got
Jersey.
you.
And when I graduated high school, I was either go to Atlantic City for tech theater or move to Philly and be more on
Uh-huh.
the creative side. So came to Philadelphia. Yeah, but
Got
I've been
you.
pretty much in the Delaware Valley good chunk of my life, except for a short stint in Jersey City.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So the ideas around 1776 have been swirling in your head for quite some
Hmm.
time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I mean I think they did a good job like talking about sort of the politics around slavery, and since that experience, I've been to the National Museum of African American History and Culture many times.
Mhm.
I'm a charter member, and I've walked through all of that and saw how this was just the way to do business, and everyone was on the same page, and it was just terrible. What a
Oh, wow.
terrible. I mean, but also beautiful because of how they laid it out and explained it. It's like they held nothing back. And if you've ever been to the museum, you start levels below the ground at the beginning of slavery, and then you work your way up to the main level, or the I guess like the lower level, because there's a escalator to get there, but there's this fountain that you can go and sort of decompress in, because everything you just went through is such a ride. And it's before the
Mhm.
celebration of Black history becomes like the culture and how we've impacted society over the years.
Right,
As
right,
you get
right.
higher to the top levels of the museum, which is just a big celebration of everything we brought to society culturally.
I haven't been as of yet, but it's my goal to like go and really spend some time there. But of course I go to DC a lot.
Mhm.
Typically it's for work.
Yeah.
So I don't get a chance to do all of the personal stuff that I should be doing, but
Mhm.
I'm scheduled to be in DC next month. I think I'm going to take you up on that and actually go.
Yeah, yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing that up.
I believe after 1 o'clock you can just walk in. I think you need reserved tickets if you come in before that.
Got you. Got
Yeah.
you. I'm gonna check that out. Thank you for that.
Great. So, a lovely but nice departure as we catch up with Jeffrey L. Page since the last time we've had a chat. So now we'll move into Cost of Living by Martina Majok. Is that correct?
Uh,
Majok?
yep.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
great. So tell me about your introduction and your first impressions of Cost of Living.
Oh wow. So the artistic directors of Philadelphia Theater Company, they reached out to me to ask me to direct this production. I was familiar with the production, obviously because I live in New York, and I remember that it was on Broadway. I think it's the production that kind of led up into the global pandemic.
Mm,
Um, so I was very familiar with the production and had planned on going to see it, but life prevented that. So I never got a chance to see it. I think it's a good thing that I didn't go to see it, because typically you're impacted by things that you see,
yeah.
and I think that it would have shifted. I don't know whether for the better or for the worse. It would have shifted how I enter into this story.
Mm,
And when I read the script, uh, it spoke to this idea that we all have disabilities. Some of those disabilities are apparent and some of those disabilities are unapparent, right? um in Choir Boy, actually, one of the actors told a story that he remembered when he had a cast on his foot, and people would open the door for him. Oh my god, you have a cast on your foot. Let me help you get that, and let me help you do this, and let me help you, you know and he was super appreciative at everyone's generosity when they were able to see that he in some way, shape, or form was disabled.
mm,
um uh but then he got the cast removed, and the injury was still there. He was still unable to do certain things, but the cast was no longer there, so people could no longer see that he was disabled in some way, shape, or form. And he said he was heartbroken, um, at how people totally changed. Like there was no more holding the doors, and there was no more, helping to get this or helping to get that. And it makes me think about the things that we all have going on in our lives, every single one of us. Some of those things we wear in a very apparent way, and some of those things are hidden deep inside of us. Some of those things, have to do with our emotional abilities or inabilities, and some of those things have to do with our physical abilities or inabilities. And so, And so I think what the play is getting at is we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. And just because you see my disability doesn't mean that I'm a better person or a worse person. And just because you don't see my disability doesn't mean that I'm a better or worse person.
Yeah.
And I think we get that very clearly from these characters of John and Jess and Ani and Eddie. We see so much of what they're going through, and then eventually, when we don't see Ani or John anymore, we're left with two characters who have their own broken selves to reckon with. And I think that is the beauty of this play.
Yeah. I I was, yeah, like halfway through the production, I was thinking, I was like, wow, there's invisible disabilities at play here as well. And we're being visually consumed by the visual. And but we are also experiencing the struggles they're having internally as well, particularly uh, Jess and Eddie. Um,
Mhm.
and their characters are so compelling. Like I felt like we got a lot of information about all of them, but I kind of felt like there's so much more to Jess that we don't necessarily know about as well, because um, you can see that she is, in a sense, trying to repress that struggle and move forward and realize, she's got things to do, but also you're just like, tell me more about this. Like, how are you not, you know, stereotypically in a better situation? Like, tell me more.
Right, right,
But
right.
but as we experience her, she is applying for a job, and that's not really the space to break down your life story, per se.
And it's interesting, right? Because we're in a space and time in our community where suddenly Harvard graduates and Yale graduates and college graduates and PhDs and all of these other folks are suddenly having a big problem finding work.
Yeah.
And like Jess's character, she went through this institution, Princeton, and she's left with needing to work at bars and do other odd jobs here and there. you know Meanwhile, she has the trauma of whatever she's going through in her life
Hmm.
added on to that. you know um I don't know, is this should I do spoiler alerts or
uh,
how, you tell me, how should we go about this? Because it's so much that I want to say, but I certainly don't want to spoil things for people who have not seen the piece.
well, we still want we still want people to experience it. It is the journey that we are experiencing as well. So I would take it through that lens. If you know that it's still the journey that is that we're there for, think about that in the sense of like, am I giving something away?
Okay, so I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this. I deeply believe that Jess's mother is dead.
Hmm.
And I believe that she calls her mother as a form of therapy.
Hmm.
So the scene where she calls her mother, I think that she has come to a place in her life where she's gotten what she needed from life.
Hmm.
And and this is perhaps the last time that she will make this phone call.
Hmm.
Um I have other beliefs as well in this piece that might shock you. Um but yeah, I believe and without getting into all of that, I do believe that Jess Jess has a heavy burden on her shoulders. This is more than just, caregiving for someone who is not able.
Mhm.
This is also her life that she's needing to truck around in some way. It's interesting. I have a friend who went to opening night and to see the play, and she said, Jeffrey, I cried. I cried at the point that, you know, at the last scene where Jess is talking to Eddie, and she said, Jeffrey, me being from North Philadelphia and me having the life that I had, Jess's story is me. I see that was exactly my story. So all of that to say, I think Martina does a beautiful job at coloring characters and giving them life beyond the page. Um uh and this idea of apparent disabilities versus unapparent disabilities. I think we have to learn how to treat each other with a modicum of dignity and respect,
Yeah.
um, because we don't know what the other is going through.
Yeah. And with that viewpoint, with through that lens of Jess's struggle in her past, you can kind of say that Jess is standing still while making up for the loss of her mother, or and in a sense seeking out this job opportunity as redemption. I wasn't able to do enough for my mother, so maybe this is how I return these favors. I mean, not favors, but like this is how I redeem myself by being there when I wasn't.
Yeah, and it's also and I don't mean to lead you, my friend, but I would also I would also say that there's something about John mentioning hookers in the way that he mentions hookers. There's something about that, and there's something about John uh um asking her to come to his apartment and then suddenly suggesting that this was just for work. I didn't want you to do anything except
Hmm.
for work, when literally that's not what you said, John.
Yeah.
And me and the actors, we went over and over and over that moment, to where it was like, no, John, this is not. He's literally like, if I'm your employer, do I say to you, you want to come over tonight?
Yeah.
Like, do I say that to you, or do I suggest that there's a work opportunity that could happen, and I would love to have you helping me
Yeah.
in some way,
Well, I love what isn't said in that moment,
right?
because it is misleading, and it's an awkward moment too, where it does feel like something is starting.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they have been in the most vulnerable spaces. And earlier dialogue from John is essentially like, I'm putting up walls from the door. And if you can get past these walls, I think I can let you in. Like
Mm.
saying, this is my first time seeking out support on my own and not through an agency.
Yeah.
And then saying, like, are you prepared for this? You're going to have to do this and that. And that's the equivalent of saying, like, I'm a lot. I'm going to let you know that I'm a lot from the door. And if that's something you can deal with, then there might be a future. And it's like, why would you put all that out if you're trying to, you know, connect with someone, but
Right.
you're also keeping them at a distance at the same time?
Well, Darnell, you have to lead me here because I could say a lot. I could say a lot, and I'm trying to tamper myself down a little
Yeah.
bit because
Well,
because I've
I
been
would
sitting with this for a while.
I would say we're jumping all over the piece. We're out of sequence, and so I think it works because we're not going scene by scene. You know,
Okay.
I think
I'm
when they
just
get
I'm
in
just
here, they're not
warning
going to
I'm
say.
just I'm just I'm just warning you because I can go there.
Listeners, this conversation is part of the conversation. Um, Still, go experience the piece. Buy the script, read it. Have
Yes.
conversations with your friends. Unpack this as we're unpacking this, but we're being cryptic. I don't think you're. This is supplemental enough to not go see the show.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just saying,
agree.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
So while you are getting finding your question, let me ask you a question.
Hmm.
You haven't seen so you have seen Choir Boy and you have seen Cost of Living. Did
Hmm.
you didn't see A Lady Day, did you?
And no, I missed that one. There was scheduling things on that one.
Okay, no worries. So is there a correlation between the two works that you've seen of mine?
Hmm. So there was something I noticed. It felt like the movement was choreographed,
Mm.
and I know that's your background, and so I was wondering about direction in terms of blocking and movement, um, because we are dealing with persons with disabilities, and there is sort of a dance that kind of goes on in terms of, like, how to care for them. And I noticed, as the scenes were transitioning, there was action happening as that scene was sort of retreating and the new scene was entering into the space. But we were seeing that it wasn't like, okay, this scene is done and now you're seeing actors shuffle off the stage. It wasn't that. It was very much like, we are still in this moment. We are still moving through, even though you cannot see all of these moments. I was fortunate enough to sit in row A, in the center. I said, who important did not have these seats or canceled or something? I felt so privileged sitting right there at dead center, lights up on Eddie, Ross Beschler, who is, who we love, Ross Beschler. Lights
Uh-huh.
up on that. I felt so privileged because I'm seeing it in a box, but I was also thinking, like, I wonder if I was 10 rows back, what that view would have looked like to me. Seeing
Uh,
more of it without having to, like, I didn't have to tilt my head or anything, but it did feel like a box because that opening scene is essentially a box. We are sort of blocked in. We don't see anything else. And then the scenes as they transition, the vignettes are boxes that they're in,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
also, in storytelling, these are struggles. How do we exist in this box? How do these two characters exist in these boxes, in these spaces that are, in John's home, in Ani's home? How they're interacting in that and not exiting out of those spaces, dealing with tough moments.
Yeah, I also think that, like, with these boxes, Freud writes a lot around. He writes a lot about dreams and how dreams are. It's almost like the mind's way of making sense of memories that we don't fully reckon with,
Hmm.
and memories that we fully reckon with. And so they are compartmentalized. So then I take that and I think about a doll's house,
Hmm.
like an actual toy, not the play, but an actual toy, a doll's house, right? And what is a doll's house? Well, a doll's house is essentially a box. And in this box, you put in this box things that are important to you. You and if at the time what's important to you is um two men or two women or a man and a woman or a dog and a cat or red and black or couch or a tub or a sink or a faucet or a door or a window. I think psychologically we learn about who you are based on how you build your box.
Hmm.
And so each scene contains a memory. It's a memory, right? Because the way the play functions is the top of the scene is actually the end of the scene. I'm sorry, the top of the play is actually the end of the play.
Hmm.
So it actually starts with Eddie, but that opening sequence is actually the last sequence. And then sequentially we start at the second scene and we go through, and then the top of the play comes back into play when Eddie and Ani meet,
Hmm.
right? So essentially when Ani is I'm sorry, when Eddie and Jess meet, and essentially when Jess speaks on the phone to her mother, that is kind of at the same point in time that we are seeing Eddie in the prologue
Hmm.
at the bar, right? And so we're playing with memory, and we're playing with what we remember, what we don't remember. I remember my wife. I remember needing to care for my wife. I remember wanting to divorce my wife. I remember then my wife getting into a situation that she needed me to care for her. And I remember me just sitting on the floor of the bathroom talking to her, and she was in the bathtub. I remember this. And so these vignettes, these scenes, these boxes are filled with things that are necessary for us to remember.
Hmm.
So it's not really reality. We're not dealing with realism.
Hmm.
We're dealing with a dream state.
Hmm.
We're dealing with an impressionistic dream-like state. That's what we're dealing with. So these boxes are actually a way that we are reckoning with the world. So it's a doll's house in the same way that a kid plays with toys. The only reason that kids play with toys is because it's an unfettered way for a child to reckon with the big traumas and the little traumas of their life. Is they reckon with it through play. And so inside of these boxes is the same kind of idea. So we're playing with memory, we're playing with how memory is compartmentalized, how it's pulled apart, how it connects different disparate parts of our psychology that we think are actually totally separate.
Hmm.
um but they're all connected in a very interesting way.
Huh. And so, does that speak to the sort of simplicity of those scenes? Um, Particularly, like, the entrance to John's house, is just two doorways. And then when we get back to John's home, we're just in the bathroom, and it's just that space. And Ani's home is sparse, and it's just the things that you need, for this scene to progress. There's no
let's
there's no art on
let's
the walls.
imagine well let's imagine Jess
Hmm.
for a second.
Hmm.
Okay. And let's imagine Jess in years to come is telling her story.
Hmm.
What does Jess remember?
Yeah.
What does she remember? She remembers this door. She walks in this door and is this like this large apartment, this this very modernistic. You could tell like some millionaire or even a billionaire lives here. It's styled in such a way. Um, she might remember there's a table right there. There was a flower pot right
Hmm.
here. And I remember this because I remember these small things because it's the larger thing that is really triggering to me. The larger thing of me actually falling in love with this man. I actually fell in love with this man. I actually fell in love with this disabled man, right? And I assumed that he fell in love with me. And he invited me over one day, and I dressed myself up and I put on my best wig, and I put on my best shoes, and I put on my best dress. Mind you, I don't have a place to live. I'm living out of my car.
Hmm.
So the work of me doing that is enormous, right? And I go to his home, and the insult of him of none of that being true, and him simply saying, you know, I need a shave and a shower. That's all I need from you. I don't need your love. I don't need your conversation. I don't need your company. I need a shave and a shower. And then you can go on about your day.
Hmm.
And then she says, "Well, it's cold outside. Can
Hmm.
I at least stay here? I mean, we're friends at this point. Like, I've been taking care of you. I've been washing your private areas, and like we're close at this point." And and he says no. And he says no because she stole some soap.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going through all of this for a reason, right? So she's sitting now once upon a time she's sitting down and she's speaking to her pastor or her priest or her psychiatrist. And what does she remember? Similarly, I would say the same thing to Eddie. What does Eddie remember about his wife? I don't remember. I don't remember a toilet. I don't care about a toilet.
Hmm.
I don't care about a sink. I just remember the beauty of this bathtub.
Yeah.
That's all I remember. That's all I want to remember, because at the end of that moment, the wife that I love so much, she said something really beautiful to me. She said, "It was really nice getting to know you."
Hmm. Yeah.
And that had to do with three things, and three things alone: the tub, the radio, and the window.
Hmm.
And that's it.
Yeah. Wow. That's and this is why the conversations are so wonderful, because you may not pick up on that, at when you first start to unpack the experience, but maybe the second or third time as you try to tell someone else of your experience, it all starts to evolve. Like I know when I saw you in the lobby, I was saying like my thoughts on this are continuing to evolve as I'm like making sense of everything I just experienced, and then talking to others about what they just experienced, the things that they picked up on because of their path, their introduction into the space. And I was like, I know this is great for a conversation, because there's so much going on here. It's not, of course, we know theater is not just on the surface. There's so many deeper levels to unpack here, and I love that visual now. I feel like now I want to go and see it again and process it with that tidbit of information, knowing like, wow, yes, because I do remember seeing the bathtub saying, this is how you should have a bathroom. The center is this beautiful tub and nothing else matters. You want to
Well,
have space, because otherwise, if you're just crammed into usually the bathtub and the shower are like crammed into a corner, and it's not a, you
exactly.
know,
And you and if you think about it, like, just think about like going back to the house that you grew up in.
mhm.
And for some reason, at least with me, it's like, oh man, I remember this house being so much bigger,
Yeah,
and but then you go back and you're like, oh wow, this is not, this is
this
crazy.
isn't
Like
enough.
like okay,
How do we live here?
like do do me do like let's play a game real quick, okay?
Mhm.
Tell me about the time that you lost your first tooth.
I lost my first tooth. Uh, so I definitely remember there was a conversation about the tooth fairy. I remember I had a bunk bed. It was me and my brother. I remember they were like, it wasn't like a thin cover, like a top. The top cover wasn't thick, you know. I do remember that, and there was a pattern on it. This is crazy. Like I'm really pulling right now. There was like a floral pattern on the top cover, and I remember putting that tooth under my pillow and it not being there in the morning.
Okay, so conversation about tooth fairy, bunk bed, your brother,
Hmm.
a pattern, like a floral pattern on the bed sheet,
Yeah.
and you putting your tooth under the pillow, you waking up and the tooth not being there.
Hmm.
Okay, literally, that's what we're talking about. Am
Yeah.
I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's so much more to that room.
And
Uh,
there's so much more. There's electrical outlets, and there was probably, depending on when and where and what time you were raised, there was probably a television in your room. There was probably a this or that in a dresser drawer, and
mhm.
was it next to the kitchen? Was it not next to the kitchen? Was it next to the stairway? And da 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 da. There's all kinds of stuff. But what you remember is the tooth fairy, your brother, a bunk bed, a floral pattern, and you putting a tooth under the pillow.
Mhm.
That's what you remember.
Yeah.
That's important to you, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's something about what we remember. So it goes again, with this poetry of the apparent and the unapparent, the things that we see and the things that we don't see. I think there's poetry with respect to that. Can we play one more game? Can we do it one more time? I got one more. And this
Yes.
might be more than what you bargained for here.
No, I love it. I'm here for it.
Tell me about the time that you lost your virginity.
Ooh. Ooh. Okay. Uh, hmm. Okay. um,
What do you see? What do you see?
I see a pool.
A pool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see a pool. I see a sunny day. There's a
Sunny day.
backyard,
Pool, sunny day, backyard,
and I see a friend.
a friend. Okay, pool, sunny day, backyard, and a friend. All right. And that is what so here's my argument. This is what is important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And there could have been a million other things at play that are simply not important to you.
Yeah.
But what's important to you are those things. And so what we have created in these two little scenarios is your own doll's house.
Mm.
These are the moments that are important to you. This is what I remember when I lost my tooth for the first time, and this is what I remember when I lost my virginity.
Yeah.
These are the things that are. I need a pool, I need a sunset, I need a backyard, and I need a friend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I believe that the way that Martina has set up the play, it makes really rich opportunities to set this stuff up, and for the both seen and unseen, the both apparent and unapparent, to become visible in silences
Yeah.
through what is not said. Also notice that in the opening scene, Eddie was at this bar, and it was a sparse bar, but it was gaudy. It had tons of stuff in it, and lights and pictures and designs and all kinds of stuff, but it was so empty.
Yeah.
Now think about that metaphor.
No
You have
windows
the
in
you
those
have
bars.
this all of this stuff, all of this stuff. You have all of this stuff. You have the big house, and you have the nice car, and you have the beautiful body, and you have the this, and you have the that, and you have all of this stuff, and yet you are so empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's about the core of who we are, and what the brain is actually going through, what it remembers, and the power of that memory.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's such a it's such a great realization too, because I think on the surface you might say where is, but also like you're not going to dress you wouldn't dress the set with anything that's not going to be used, that isn't like telling the story. And so yeah, it's justified for Ani's house to be so sparse, because it's not the those aren't the elements that'll be part of the memory. The memory
Right.
is about their interaction.
This apartment that you moved in, tell me the story of your first memory in this apartment that you live in, or house. I don't know if you live in a house or
That I
not.
live in now.
Yeah.
Okay. So my first,
Your first memory in this particular living quarters.
yeah. So my first memory is, so I knew. So I live in a 2-bedroom house with a finished basement, and I knew that moving into it, I wasn't going to move in with all of my furniture. I was in a sublet transition because I was trying to buy a house, but then this house came up for rent, and I said it's checking all the other boxes except I won't own it. So I'll do this. And I do remember sitting in an empty room thinking about there's an opportunity to get a fresh start in here, because it's not about It's not about bringing the furniture I made work in another place. There's an opportunity to start fresh here. And so, when I made purchases for this house, I thought about it as like I'm setting up for this house, and it did make me think about whenever I decide to move from here, I'm probably going to purge a lot of these things because they were for this house, and you know may not necessarily work in the next house.
And it's interesting because you have this thing called a cost.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is a cost? What is a cost? Like like a toll? Is that what a cost is? And like what like definitively, what is a cost? And I'm looking it up because I wanna read the definition of it. A cost of an object or action require the payment of a specified sum of money before it can become acquired or done. So now I'm going to read it without the parenthetical. It says required the payment of before it can be acquired or done. The second is estimate of the price, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is a is so it's something that has to be paid before it can be done. And so all of these memories, right? This is the cost
Yeah.
that we have to endure in order to live the life and remember the life that we live. And so I think about, like what does Martina mean by cost of living? And well, I think it means is that there's a cost. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is the cost? Like, what is the price that you pay? What's the toll? What's the tax? What's the is it do we commit ourselves to a life of loneliness?
Mm.
Do we commit ourselves to a life of service? Do we commit ourselves to a life of debauchery? Like, what is the cost? In order, if I constantly feel lonely, then my cost is probably going to be debauchery,
Mm.
right? And so on and so forth. you know so we have to analyze all of those things. So the simple gesture of Eddie giving Jess a slice of his pizza at the very end of the play, I just think is beautiful. Of course, that's not what is written in the script, but I just thought, like, that simple gesture where we're totally equalized. There is no hierarchy in terms of you're up there, I'm down here, or and so on and so forth. We're coming to a place of equilibrium. And I have two pieces of pizza here. Now you have one piece, I have one piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the end of the show.
Yeah. I I remember what I wanted to ask about earlier.
Uh-huh.
We had talked about the line where John mentions that he had tried hookers in the past, and it made me think about sex work in in the uh, in the disabled community, and how it seems like in that moment that line was kind of delivered for laughs, but there's actually a benefit and a conversation about sex work in the disabled community. And I was wondering if there was any conversation about that in the process.
It's interesting that for me, when John delivers that line, it's not for laughs. It's interesting when the audience, because the audience is always the missing link to any piece of conversation or art. Like the watching eye is always the missing link. Um, and so for me, like that was harsh.
Mm-hmm.
That was always a harsh. It was never a laughing moment, and I actually think that perhaps the audience is laughing because they feel a bit uncomfortable,
Yes.
which is a good thing because we have to sit inside of our uncomfort or our discomfort, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, uh, we spoke about that a lot. We
Mm.
spoke about that a lot, and actually, part of the thing that that I was a little hesitant to say, you're bringing it up once again. I have a belief that Jess uh, has been a
Mm.
sex worker. I have a belief um, that John found out about her and was assuming that this was might have turned into a situation that he could certainly kill two birds with one stone,
Mm.
right? Um, but it turned into something so much more beautiful.
Yeah.
It turned into a friendship. It turned into a system of support, and it turned into the potentiality of love.
Mm. And he,
Then John, I think John maybe called home to his mama, and his mama said, "Hey, baby, how you doing?" And his mom reminded him of his status,
mm.
of his class. You are a billionaire. And then Jess comes back over, and being reminded of his status and the class difference between the two, he then needs to push her away.
Mm. Yeah. I was
You know, so
I was gonna say, do you think it was progressing before the soap? Because the soap, in a way, it's like a we had no idea. I don't know. I don't remember if I visually saw her do something with the soap. You know, and so when that
the
comes
soap was
up,
arbitrary. The soap was arbitrary. This
yeah.
like he was just looking for something to say.
Hmm.
That's like you going over somebody's house and saying, "I stole some tissue." He was just looking for something to say. He needed. I think that he needed to push her away.
Interesting.
So
I Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, and that is also what makes that moment so awkward. It just seems like it's all moving in a direction that, yeah, perhaps we didn't expect. We're introduced to John with his walls up, and over time, as that time progresses with them together, you see those walls coming down, and because that whole conversation about being vulnerable, and it does seem like, why would you, and this is, I could see if this happened in real life, you're getting in your head about, like, why would he invite me over later, like these aren't my normal hours. I told him this is a busy night for me at the bar, and I stand to make a good amount of the money that I need, on these nights, and he's asking me to, like, to compromise that. And so this
But
has to
what?
mean something.
Yeah, and what did you just say? You said, "Why wouldn't he?" What? What did you say?
Uh,
You said three words. Why wouldn't he? Invite me
Oh,
over.
oh yeah, yeah. Why would he invite her over at night?
So my question is this: if you had an employee, would you invite your employee over, or would you request their presence because you have some work for that you need for them to fulfill?
Yeah, yeah. If it was work specific, I would state that because in a sense it is you're kind of saying like you're saying I need you. This isn't it would be clear if it was just a hang. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I like. That's why I like the crypticness of the dialogue because I would have had more questions. What are we going to do? Like,
Right.
and what should I don't know. How should I prepare? What can I bring or anything like that? Because I think if that question had come up, um, if that was the initial intention, oh, here's a question. If you, because you mentioned that perhaps a phone call to his mom, a phone call to reality came in between these moments. When did that call come? Did that call come after she made a plan to meet him later tonight?
After.
Or, I mean, like after, before she returned?
I think what happened is you are witnessing my imagination right now. I think what happened is he really liked her. Like
Yeah.
he was like she's caring for him in a way. He's laughing and joking with her. He's putting the water in his mouth and gargling the water. He's like acting
Yeah.
silly, not like a PhD student,
Mhm.
and he's asking her questions about her personal life, and she's wiping stuff off of his mouth, and at that moment he says, "Are you busy tonight? Would you like to come over?" Literally, that's what he says.
Mhm.
Like, that's what the script says, right? And she's like, "Whoa, whoa, I don't know." But she's also enjoying it, right? And she eventually says, "Yeah, I'll come over," right? She leaves. Ring, 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 ring. "Hey, Johnny, babe, how you doing? It's your mom. Call me back." He calls her back. "Hey, mom, saw you called. What's going on?" "Oh, nothing. Just checking on you, babe. How you doing, babe?" Corella, our maid. Oh my gosh, she did the strangest things today.
Mm.
She asked if she could like come over. She asked if she could like come over to Thanksgiving, and I was like, "Are you kidding, Corella? You're the maid. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?" And in John's mind, he's like, "Oh, oh,
Yeah. This is the help.
this is the help." And so then cut to um uh Jess coming into the apartment. "John, hey, I'm here, babe. I have new dress on, new wig, new shoes. Hey, hey," right? And he comes in and he's like, "Whoa." But he's surprised, but he's not surprised. He's trying to figure out how to work it,
Yeah.
right? And so he's like, "Yeah, I just wanted you to come over and shower me." Wait a minute, that wasn't the request. That wasn't the tone, nor was it inside of the words that you said. So I'm not crazy. You are making me think that I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. You did not ask me to come over here for work.
Yeah.
You did not. You said you want to come over tonight. That's what you say. If I'm your employer, I'm not going to say to my employee, "You want to come over tonight." I'm just not going to say that.
Mm.
I'm going to say, I have something for you to do. Are you available?"
Yeah.
You know? And so, we learned a lot. But I think as an audience, what Martina is trying to give us, I think, is that whether you are disabled apparently so or unapparently so, you can be a good person or a bad person. You can do good things or bad things. It doesn't matter. We're all people. Just because you have a broken leg doesn't mean that you're Tiny Tim and
Mhm.
everything that you do is gonna be altruistic.
Yeah.
Like you could certainly have bad bad character or some character flaws inside of you, and I think that's the bigger thing that Martina is getting at is we all are the same, and we should be less quick to judge people and simply treat people with dignity and respect.
Mm. Um, I I wanted to. We're running way over time, so please let me know if you have to get going. Um, but I wanted to talk about the accessibility consultant, Katie Sampson, and the involvement of an accessibility consultant in this piece, because again, there are visible disabilities and there are invisible disabilities, and so unless it is visually given to us or spoken in dialogue, it's not clear where everyone's disabilities lie. And so, just talk about the involvement of the accessibility consultant in terms of like working with all of the actors and having everyone in this mindset of accessibility.
Well, Katie was extremely instrumental in helping me to understand her story,
Hmm.
right? And she also was the person who taught me not to say visible and invisible,
Hmm.
because that's a very restrictive term,
Okay.
right? And
Noted.
so yeah, if you can hear, I'm like very adamantly saying apparent and unapparent,
Yeah.
um, because that's a more acceptable term. Because uh, what if these terms like visible and invisible, what if these are actually exclusionary terms?
Hmm.
You know, so Katie was really instrumental in helping me to understand certain things like that. She was instrumental in introducing me to people like Becky and other uh, uh, disabled advocates and activists within the Philadelphia community. Um, she helped me to understand what it's like for her to get dressed.
Hmm.
Like, I would ask questions like, Katie, like, what is it like for you to get dressed? And do you need help? How much help do you need? How long does it take? All of that stuff. And she did so much for me to understand all of that stuff. I have a friend who said, Jeffrey, John, Christian's performance was inconsistent because sometimes he was able and sometimes he was not able. And and I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, sometimes he was able to kind of put himself in the chair, and then the other times he just couldn't.
Hmm.
I was like, and see, Katie is the one who taught me about all of this. Like a person who has cerebral palsy, for instance, um, they are able to do certain things with their body and body weight and arms.
Hmm.
It's just that is the default of where they hold their arms makes it look as if they cannot use their arms, like as if they have a disability in their arms, when in actuality it just means that, for instance, with Katie, she told me I could get myself dressed. It's just a difference between if it's going to take me an hour with
Hmm.
someone helping me, or is it going to take 3 hours of me doing it myself?
Yeah.
Like, I can do it myself, but it's just going to take me much longer to do it myself, you know? So Katie was very instrumental in me understanding, like, what that means in terms of, like, oh, this is how a person is showered, and so on and so forth. Also, I had a huge conversation. I brought together various members of the Philadelphia community to talk to the actors and myself about caregiving and disability work and all of that stuff. And her name is Aisha Talley. She came in and she spoke about what her life is like as a professional caregiver, and she was phenomenal. She taught us the actors and myself about how she would lift someone up out of the chair, how she would transfer them to the shower, and so on and so forth. And as she did it, I said to myself, this is so beautiful.
Hmm.
Like, from a choreographic standpoint, it's so beautiful to watch,
Hmm.
you know, because we're looking at the essence of humanity and what it cost. Like, the essence of humanity is we need each other. So as much as the global pandemic has forced us to not be around each other and to not care for each other and not touch each other and not look at each other, in actuality, we are mammals.
Hmm.
And like all mammals, we actually need to be around each other.
Yeah.
We need each other.
Hmm.
And so I think there are certain moments in the play that I've specifically constructed and choreographed, that I wanted to show the beauty of basic human need.
Yeah. And it shows. Those were moments where it clearly felt, you know, well planned. I mean,
Oh, wow.
it was like it was organic the way it flowed, but it did feel like a choreography. Um,
Mm,
and those moments, and you're right, it is beautiful to see, like, the process of, like, handling with care,
mhm.
and that is the training in a caregiver.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, so shout out to all the caregivers, and like the work that they do is tremendous. It's
yes.
tremendous. And I'm gonna get this totally wrong, but someone said something like, all of us will either need care, need care, give care, or something. Like, we will all be in a proximity around care, whether we
Hmm.
know it or not.
Yeah.
you know Whether we know it or not, we will all be in very, very close proximity to what it means uh uh to traffic in the area of care.
Hmm.
So I think the way that the world is going right now is just scary, because the world, we're being forced away from each other.
Yeah.
So that means we are going to get sick alone and be disabled alone, and perhaps even die alone. And I think that we really have to reckon with that. We
Hmm.
really have to reckon with the cost of all of that and what it means to be in that space. And I think that it's worth the cost to make an effort to be around each other more, to talk to each other more, to care for each other more. I think it's worth the cost.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Um, does the overall production achieve what you set out to achieve?
I think I think that only you can tell me that. And I mean that. I mean that. I don't know. M- Uh, for me, for me, I have a deep belief that only mediocre and shallow work is ever finished.
Hmm.
So nothing is ever finished unless it's mediocre.
Hmm.
So I'm always looking for ways to improve and things to improve upon. So really, the only people that's able to answer that question are folks who are coming to watch it.
Yeah. That's why you have to be a part of the conversation, listeners. This is just part of this conversation. You got to get to Philadelphia Theater Company and experience Cost of Living, directed by
Yes.
Jeffrey L. Page, written by
Hey.
Martina Majok. Oh my God, I know I could talk to you forever, and I love that about you. And I'm so it's just so great to be able to unpack this with you because there was so much I thought about this piece. There was so much many of my colleagues had to say about the piece, and when I sense that there's just a lot of chatter around it, like this is a must see. Like you have to be a part of this conversation. And
Come on, put that out there. Put that out. Why am I not seeing marketing that says this is a must see?
must
Like,
see.
come on, put it out there. I haven't seen any reviews of this as of yet.
Huh. I think it. Oh, I think a review went out today.
Oh,
um,
okay.
but yeah, I mean, that's how I feel. I always say, even in my office at Theater Exile, I say, I'm an odd bird. Like I enter into a theatrical space. Um, you know, I'm willing to give myself completely to this experience, and I'm searching for something to take away. And I know it's going to be different than the person sitting next to me, and I'm looking forward to that. And I always say, you could walk in through the front door and leave out the back door, or you could enter in through the attic window, or there might be another way into this, and you're constantly on because you're trying to find a way in. It's a dialogue.
Right.
It's something that an actor says that pulls you in, that draws your attention, and maybe you listen more intently after you hear it. And
Right.
those are the things that, if you are consumed by other things, like at home when you're watching television, you can easily get up and go into the kitchen, grab a snack. You can run to the bathroom. One of your friends will talk to you. But like in the theater, the lights go down, and hopefully mobile devices silenced, candy is unwrapped, everything, so that you can completely give yourself to this experience. And you don't really need to know anything about it to take something away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I've known over the years, I've asked the question, like, do we need like a precursor? Is there something that's helpful to sort of walk into the space with? And really, the question is, not if this is a good piece of art, you know?
Well, I don't know because I think that we're inside of a community where our attention is slowly being robbed from
Hmm.
us, and it's being robbed from us uh as babies. We're taught that it like I don't have to invest, and I don't have to have skin in the game in things that I care about. I
Hmm.
don't. I can simply be there, and then at the slightest moment that I start getting bored or unaffected, I can just get on my phone.
Hmm.
or I can just I could just say bye, I'll talk to you later, or whatever. And Octavia Butler, speaks about this a lot in the Parable series, where she talks about like these snippets of news. Like the news it has to be, under like whatever, however many characters she says in the Parable of the Sower. Like, she speaks about this, right? Where we are slowly becoming more and more and more. I hate to say it, and I hope that your listeners forgive me for saying this, but we're becoming more dumb.
Hmm.
Like, because the rigor of actually giving our real attention to a thing is too much.
Yeah.
The rigor of giving our full attention, going on a date, and the rigor of putting your phone away and focusing on the person that you are on the date with, the rigor of going to see a play and just fully focused on the play, the rigor of being inside of a conversation and saying, I am going to give my full attention to this conversation. Society is slowly depleting us of the necessity to be able to do that, and what is required is now too much for us. We can't remember, plays used to be 6 hours, 8 hours long,
Yeah.
and then it went down to like 4 hours, and then it went down to like 2 hours, and now it's like we need a quick 75 minutes and we got to be done.
Yeah.
Now we're entering into a space where no intermissions, one act plays, in and out, quick, because I don't have time. I don't have time. We're
Yeah.
entering into that phase, and I think that we have to nurture. We have to nurture audiences into what this experience is, and this is it's about doing emotional and intellectual push-ups.
Hmm.
Like, let me help you to understand what this experience is going to be. Let me get you conditioned to understand what this experience is going to be. When I read my first book, it was hard. It was hard. I would fall asleep. I would fall asleep reading a book. I would fall asleep like 2 sentences in. Like, we have to condition our minds to be big and bright and exciting on their own volition,
Yeah.
without anyone else
Hmm.
exciting it. That's why the saying is, there's no such thing as boring. What is it? Boring situations, only boring people.
Hmm.
That's real, because you should be able to make a world out of every single situation that you enter into.
Yeah.
It's your brain. It's your brain. If you are bored, that's on you.
Yeah.
If you're bored, it means that you're a boring person.
And you walked in with a wall up, and not
Exactly.
even trying to find a way in. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I do think that there are ways that we could prevent theater from not being so elitist, and
Hmm.
actually, reach out to communities and help them to understand what the parameters of this world is. I do think that there's a way that we can help condition communities and people into what a theater experience is, and I just don't find that we're doing that as much as we should right now.
Yeah.
So,
Oh boy.
that's me on my little soapbox.
Oh my, Jeffrey, this has been great. What a great conversation. Yeah, I could talk to you for another 2 hours. Not going to pull out
Thank
your
you,
time
Gianna.
though.
I appreciate you.
I want to say to our listeners, Cost of Living is on stage through February 18th. You can get your tickets at philadelphiatheatercompany.org, and that's theater with the RE. Thank you to Jeffrey L. Page for such an insightful conversation. And get your tickets now. And I mean tickets plural, because theater is more fun with a +1. So
Yes,
definitely
and
do
also
that.
and let me just echo that. Get your tickets because we have to continue to lift these voices up. Please get your tickets. Support theater, y'all.
Yes, absolutely. Jeffrey L. Page, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This is up there with the Choir Boy interview. And I think at the same time, I was just like, I could talk to you forever.
Oh wow, thank you, Darnell.
I
I
could only
appreciate it.
imagine what it's like to be directed by you. What a grateful experience that must have been for all the artists you've been able to work with. I'm just I'm just grateful to be able to chat with you. So thank you so much, and
I'm
thank
so
you for
honored.
bringing your talents to Philadelphia and continuing to share that with us in PTC. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Darnell. I appreciate you.
All right. That's it for everyone, and be sure to tune in and be a part of this conversation. Get over to Philadelphia Theater Company. Thank you to our guest, Jeffrey L. Page, for joining us on today's podcast. The Broad Street Review podcast is an Emory production. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, visit us online at em3ry.com. Support Broad Street Review. Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com and click Donate to find out how. There, you can also find our social media links. Thank you for your part in keeping the conversation going.